welcome to Note Doctors. My name is Paul.
My name is Jenn.
My name is Ben.
And we are your hosts. We are all university music theory instructors who are passionate about music theory and music theory instruction. In this podcast, we will be talking about all things theory with some of the best music theory teachers in the country. If you want to know more about music theory and the most effective and innovative ways to teach it, this is the podcast for you. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Note Doctors. Thank you so much for tuning in for this special episode with Mark Brymer. Before though we get into our conversation, I do want to mention a future episode that we are planning. We are hoping to do a mailbag episode where we answer your emails, your messages, either from Facebook or from our email address, which is notedoctorspodcast@gmail.com. We've gotten a number of emails with questions and thoughts and comments, and we would love to just spend one episode just digging into those, answering those questions. So for those who have written to us and we haven't written back, we're going to do something about that. And if you're listening and you've been wanting a reason to write to us at notedoctorspodcast@gmail.com, you can do that now. And so that will be coming out in probably another month or two as we get close to summer. But we love to hear your questions. We love to hear your ideas and comments about music theory and music theory pedagogy. But today, our special guest is Mark Brymer. If you are in the choral world, you've probably heard that name. He's arranged a zillion choir songs. But it's kind of interesting how we kind of got to meet him. And Jen, give us a little backstory on kind of how Mark Brymer has entered into the sphere of Note Doctors.
Yes, so Mark is actually a theory major right now at Dallas Baptist, where I teach. He decided to finish his undergrad degree. He got a lot of gigs early on. You'll hear him tell his story about that. And so that kind of cut his degree seeking time short when he was, at the kind of traditional age, undergrad age. And so when COVID happened and his work slowed down a little bit, he thought, why not finish now? So he has come back to Dallas Baptist, or come to Dallas Baptist for the first time, but come back to school at Dallas Baptist. And he is a music theory major and really fun to have in class for sure. So I feel lucky to have him there. It's great. But that's how we know him. He is actually taking classes with me, and we all learn as much from him as anyone learns from me for sure. So
We're so excited to talk to Mark about all the possibilities out there for music business majors and how music theory plays a part in that and their success.
All right, so I will tell you about Mark. Mark is a global trailblazer in the children's music education, commercial music, and entertainment industries with such clients as McGraw-Hill, Disney, Warner Brothers, Reading Rainbow Live, Hal Leonard Print, and Music Theater International. So he's done a lot of things, and this is a great discussion.
I just thought, well, music theory will be more challenging. It was something that I avoided in college before ear training, or I just, what's the point? And, not until I started working professionally that I got the point of why. So I've been able to really embrace music theory now, and you can do a lot of things with it. I think that's the unknown about it, is that if you're wanting to go to be a professional musician in any way, or working in the studio, you're going to use this kind of knowledge, and you need the aural skills, you need the analysis skills, the transcription skills. You need all that stuff, and so I've just been thoroughly enjoying it.
Our very special guest is Mark Brymer. We are so happy to have you on as a guest on our podcast. It's kind of neat because you are actually a student of Jenn, and so
yes.
This is super exciting, and I'm sure not awkward for Jenn at all, right?
Oh, no. No, actually, it really isn't.
But so Mark, we were really excited to talk with you about kind of your career in the music business world and how music theory has played a role in your success and kind of where you are at now. As I think your story has taken an interesting turn in how you met Jenn and things like that. And so maybe just before we get into those more specific questions, maybe you could give the listeners just a brief rundown of kind of how you got to this place. You've had a really fascinating and exciting and interesting career, and so just kind of let listeners know kind of where you kind of got into music and kind of how you found your way to where you are now in less than 5 minutes or so.
Oh, okay, great. I can do that. Well, I guess it all kind of started when I was actually at North Texas, and I had started college at Millikan University and transferred to North Texas. I really started to enjoy writing and arranging. And I thought, well, if I can spend multiple hours, this is what I can do. It was not practicing piano. And I got a great education in high school. There was an orchestra at our high school. I took music theory. I took jazz theory. I took jazz piano lessons. I took classical piano lessons. And so I felt prepared. It was a little bit of a shock when I got to North Texas at the level that everybody was. But I had already been working professionally out at a Six Flags park playing piano and accompanying and working in the band there. And so that job transferred to Six Flags over Texas when I got to the lovely Denton. And I got work immediately. Almost, I had done some arranging in college, and I put together a demo and played it for the producer for the Six Flags show production shows, and he suddenly made me music director at Six Flags over Texas, right when I got to town. And so
How old were you, Mark?
I was 20 or 21.
Okay.
And it was kind of awkward at North Texas because I was known as the guy with the gig, and because I was in charge of hiring the band, and but I took this opportunity, and really by the next year I was the music director and producing recordings for 5 different parks, and that's when I just had to launch out of school and professionally working. And the thing in entertainment or music business, you just have to stay flexible. And this was the first opportunity. I took it. And I had to make some tough decisions about leaving this other college, but it seemed to be the right thing. Is you just have to stay very flexible and ready to dive into whatever. And about a year or so later, I some friends of mine from the former college had started a show choir camp, the Show Choir Camps of America, and I met a gentleman who was working for Jensen Publishing, and he was looking for a certain type of choral piece, and I wrote it and put together a new demo for him, and it ended up getting choral arranging work with Jensen, and they had all of Warner Brothers at the time. They've now been absorbed by Hal Leonard, but they were striking off on their own at the time, and so that created an opportunity for me to start writing. They were also attracted to me because I had recording ability, and I could do demos that were becoming more and more important in sales of choral material. And so that launched me. That kept me pretty busy, and that grew. And probably within about 2 years after that, I was signed full time as a staff writer with Hal Leonard Publishing, and they're the world's largest, and I've been with them ever since. So I have at this point about 3,300 choral products with them for sale, and it's my choral arrangements are really performed around the world. And but primarily in the States, primarily by high schools, middle schools, elementary, and some college level. I continued to work and write shows for Six Flags, and at a certain point, I think maybe 10 or 15 years later, I actually started producing shows for them. And I did that for about 10 or 15 years. Moved to Los Angeles because I really started, Hal Leonard brought me out to LA to start recording my material, to work with the musicians and singers out there, and just fell in love with that. My wife and I moved out to LA for about 5 years. And this would have been the early 90s. But we experienced the Rodney King riot and then the major earthquake, and decided, well, maybe this isn't the right place for us to buy a home. But I learned a lot in LA. I actually took a lot of courses at UCLA Extension, professional courses. It's people that were like working at record labels and marketing, professional songwriters that had songs on the charts, and then they would teach these courses at night. And then so I've always gone after education. So I signed up and took specific songwriting lessons from a guy that had a whole system. It took me just taking one aspect, let's say just using a song with major triads. And we would analyze song in the pop market like that. Then I would have to write one, and then we would add sevenths. And you could find pop songs like that. Then songs that used melodic extension. So if the melody began on the 9th or the 7th, the 11th, and what that did to the texture, even with triadic chords. So I got a lot of great education and worked with a lot of great musicians. But then I moved back to Dallas and just ran my business from there. And being located here, I'm 3 hours from anywhere. I can get to New York in 3 hours. I can get to LA in 2 or 3 hours. I still do my recording in LA. I send my audio engineer out to LA, and I simul in with like this, and we use a program that I can get. There's a digital broadcast that comes from the studio in LA, so I can actually sit at my Dallas desk and produce an LA session. I just did this in the last 2 days. And I've also done some large shows for Dolly Parton's Stampede and their Pirate's Voyage, where I produced, about a 90-minute soundtrack for each of those. And Christmas, I actually arranged a Christmas pirate show. And I know it sounds amazing, but
I think of pirates when I think of Christmas. Pirates are at the top of the list.
Well, hand in hand.
Right, yeah, and Mary and Joseph wading in the water to the pirate ship, but I digress. I've also done some work with McGraw-Hill textbooks and their music appreciation textbook. I've gotten work with a little company called Frog Street Press that I had to write 50 songs that were for pre-K, teaching pre-K math. So it's just kind of wherever the work is, you adapt. And so people will ask me, what music do I listen to? Well, I listen to whatever I have to write next, and I kind of, just absorb as much as I can of that style and learning from it. And so now that it gets back to me in music theory now, it's like, oh, well, that's what that's called. Or, well, that's a Neapolitan. I just thought that was a flat two. It's like, so, but what I'm loving about music theory, it aligns more with classical music. And if I'm wanting to do more film scoring, I would say film scoring arrangers and writers are more theory oriented, and so I can hear that, certainly like a John Williams, you hear his knowledge of theory and orchestration, and so I'm thoroughly enjoying being back in undergrad music theory, just because it's like, I can instantly use things I'm learning, and that's been a really nice surprise. Is that enough?
What made you?
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. What made you
great.
decide to major in theory? I mean, I know that story, but why don't you tell us what made you decide to?
I guess, with COVID, I thought, oh, well, maybe I should go back and finish up my degree. I have a lot of college credit, and DBU seemed really open to, honoring a lot of my credits. And so it's like, well, what's my major going to be? Because I could have gone back to applied piano. Wasn't going to be education, music theory, music business. Certainly, music business being taught in colleges is, I would say, fairly like a newer thing, maybe the last 20 years. But when I was in college before, it wasn't available.
Right.
And I thought, well, I kind of know that. I could probably skate through it a lot easier, but then I'm not learning anything. So at least that was my perception. I'm sure I would have learned marvelous things from these instructors, but I just thought, well, music theory will be more challenging. It was something that I avoided in college before ear training, or I just said, what's the point? And, not until I started working professionally that I got the point of why. So I've been able to really embrace music theory now, and you can do a lot of things with it. I think that's the unknown about it, is that if you're wanting to go to be a professional musician in any way, or working in the studio, you're going to use this kind of knowledge, and you need the aural skills, you need the analysis skills, the transcription skills. You need all that stuff. And so I've just been thoroughly enjoying it.
I love it. One way in which we overlap, Mark, I don't know if you know this about me, but I played for Hershey. So in Pennsylvania, I was one of their trumpet players. And I have to say, within the first week of the job, what we had to do is learn over 50 tunes by heart and be able to walk around and play all the tunes in the park or at a stage or something. But a lot of the times we were strolling. And the people that had the best theory chops were always more successful because they could internalize large chunks of music, forms of tunes, things like that. They could improvise. All these things were required of me. I was a music ed major. I was not a trumpet major, and I was not a theory major. But I think overall the skills that served me the most were actually just those core musicianship skills that I got from theory.
Right.
Aural.
Right.
That was kind of the number one useful skill set that I had at the time. I didn't realize that until I got the job, but then on the job, just reading these tunes down and then having to memorize everything. I mean, wow, I'm sure you can kind of relate to that kind of thing, just using those
very
skills.
much. Right. And, sight reading. I mean, one of my first jobs was I was the audition pianist. So, I mean, people walk in with anything and it's like, oh, this seems so high. Can you take it down a step? It's like, okay,
Here we go.
Watch my eyes get big. Okay, here we go. But it's like that's what the job was, and you were there to to make that happen, and you just had to do it and learn it, and you didn't want to embarrass yourself, so you better get it right.
Yeah, you hope they give you a piece of music in sharps, because then it's a lot easier to drop down a half step than when it's already in flats.
Yeah, but C sharp major, it's like, I don't know if I would look at that joyfully. Yeah.
That's when you ask them if they're okay to go down the semitone.
Yeah, that's right. Or you just drop it down and don't tell them. You say, oh yeah, this is, that.
And they were like, that was the best time I've ever sung that song.
I know, yeah.
Playing with me.
Sure, that's C sharp major. Oh, I'm telling them my secrets. Oh, no.
I don't know if this ever happened to you in the park. They were getting a little bit off script here, but people would ask us to play all sorts of tunes that we wouldn't know. Fight songs from obscure colleges regionally, and tunes that they, I guess, sung growing up with their parents or things. And, I'm trying to think, and we would all kind of huddle up and say, does anyone actually know this tune? Does anyone actually know this fight song? And sometimes one person would know it, and then everyone else just kind of filling in along the melody of that fight song,
Yeah.
It was just so interesting. It's just like, you'll learn so much, like you said, on the job, just having to do that in the moment,
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So yeah, and there are fewer live musician jobs now, but that was a great training ground for a lot of people in the theme parks.
Definitely.
So you've talked about a number of things: transcription, being able to sight read, things like that. So what do you think are some of the most relevant theory or aural skills topics to students who are wanting to go into kind of a music business career? May it be live performance or arranging or kind of music or recording?
Well, there are a lot of different skills. I did some thinking in this direction. And first of all, I would say aural skills, mainly in working with singers or players, is sight reading ability. Because, that's one of the reasons I like working in Los Angeles. But I have good singers here in Dallas that can read. But I have to budget ahead of time. A client wants to say, okay, we want this much music. How much will it cost us? Well, I haven't recorded it yet. So I say, well, I can record, this many minutes of music an hour, but it's reliant on hiring a set of players or singers that can sight read it and get a performance happening, in a certain amount of time. And there's nothing worse than having one player or one singer that's slow, because then it messes up the entire session. Because what happens is everybody else got it on the first take, or let's say the second take, and that person was slow. So then we need to do it again. Well, so by the third time, the one stray person is getting it. Well, everybody else is kind of tuned out because they've already played it once, and so they usually make a clam on the third pass. Okay, well, then we have to do a four, and it's just like, oh my God, time is ticking, and I'm not going to get this done in time. So sight reading is crucial, and that's one of the questions you always ask is like, can they read? Can they read? And because there are a whole set of musicians and singers that are what we call ear people, that they just. But even ear people, you can sing a part to them, and boom, they've got it, and then they can nail it. That they have to have that type of aural skills. And then maybe they have just this killer sound, and you want that sound, but they have a great ear. And then notation skills, I've got to think in terms of how do I notate my arrangements that are the easiest to read? Because again, it's a time thing. If it's confusing, it will slow it down, or they won't, they will make mistakes, and then they've got to correct it. And then again, time is marching by, or not even so much time, is that you don't get a good musical performance out of them because they're having to concentrate too much. You're trying to create music and magic in the recording, and not just, oh, they played it correctly. And then the other thing, there's an aspect with music theory that we have error detection, like where's the mistake, and it's touched on. It's usually an assessment tool, but I do that all the time. It's like, okay, wait, there's a mistake right there. Wait, there's a wrong chord, and and then we've got to find it, and our like tuning dictation, like, oh, that alto's flat on that note, or the tenors, the whole group is, all that kind of, you've got to find it, and it might just occur on one chord or one thing, and I'll be mixing and I'll yell at me, there, stop, it's like, they're all, and then we start dissecting. It's like, oh, well, sure enough, that, that third trumpet was a half step off, or something like that. And so that's another related skill that you have to be able to duplicate. So it's very important, and it's just to stress to students that you cannot blow these things off, because you've got to be excellent in these areas, because it doesn't quit when you get out of college.
It only gets harder. You have to look at the whole score instead of just two parts, or if you think a 2-part rhythm reading is difficult, try listening to 4 different trombone lines in the lab band or the four different trumpet lines, and trying to sort through that.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the competitive nature of it as well is that, in school, depending on the music school you're at, there might be this, push to be at the top and things like that. And that can be good and that can be bad. There can be negatives about a very hyper competitive place, but there can also be problems where everyone's kind of like, just kind of learning and, growing and things like that. But when you get out into the field, especially if you're wanting to get into like a professional a job, you've got to be the best because someone else is going to take that job, right? If you don't cut it, I'm sure, the people that have, maybe have not worked out the first time or the second time with you in a studio, you probably don't call them back.
No, I don't.
Right.
I mean,
no, we're not naming names here.
No, I won't name the name, but it was I was on a rhythm date and we were trying out a new pianist and he was not making it, and so I said, let's take a break, and so during the break I found him and I just asked him that I said this isn't going to work out, and I asked him to leave. I mean, nicely, and so we got back to the break and the other three guys were like, well, where's John or whatever, it's like, well, he's no longer on the session. I said, I'll play, fill in. And it kind of shocked him a little bit. It's just like, oh, wow. It's like, I better not make a mistake after that. Yeah. Because it's, I mean, if I'm arranging and I'm producing, I want the best musicians possible because that's a reflection on me. I learned a long time ago, I'm not going to hire just my friends or, that's, a buddy of mine or whatever. I want the best people because that's a reflection on my music. And so, and really in the studio to get work, it's all a business of recommendations. I can hear somebody's demo, but it's more like, oh yeah, I've worked with him or her before, and yeah, she's really solid. That's how you make decisions on who to hire.
Yeah.
Strictly.
Don't be a jerk. Don't be a jerk.
No, never.
Well, I tell my composition students the same thing about getting the best players that you can find. Like, do not ask your roommate who just has a spare oboe in their closet to play, this oboe solo. Find the very best players at the school and write for them because they will do the best job. They will represent your music better than anyone else. And so that's such good advice for students who often are like, well, I'm just going to write for someone I know and it's more and more comfortable, but it may not really give you the results that you really want.
Right. Well, because the thing, too, to realize is that once somebody gets out of college, let's say they want to start on a career, they're not just competing with the other kids at their level at the school. Really, like somebody getting out of college now, they want to get into choral writing. Well, they're competing against me for a job, or it's like everybody that's, been doing it for years. And so you've got to suddenly compete at a different level. And these days it doesn't work just to be, I'm cheaper, because we might all be cheaper. We want that gig,
How does inflation not work for composing and arranging? I mean, what's going on there?
I don't know. It's like, yeah. So you've got to have it together, and there are people getting out of college now that are quite awesome. And I see it in LA all the time. And it's just like, wow, that they're great readers and, they're just, they're great. So it's possible. You just can't get hung up on, I'm the best reader at my school. That won't work on a resume or in trying to get a professional job.
Now, you mentioned the folks who can just listen to it once and be able to sing it or play it, and those people can be successful in music, and we know all sorts of musicians out there who may not be great readers or even know their theory, but can make it in a music career. But what would you say to a student who comes to you and says, well, do I really need to get do I need to take these classes? Can't I just kind of do what you did, or even just not even take the class that you did? If I'm just going to go for it, why do I need, a music theory education? Like, what recommendations or what advice would you give to them?
Well, you, you've got you've got to learn. I mean, there's just not an environment anymore of if you think, like bands, they would block book a band and give them 6 weeks, 8 weeks in, a high level studio, and they just kind of come in and play around and discover and get a sound. And, those days don't exist anymore. And you need to show up and deliver, at least professionally. And so just thinking, now, there are some exceptions. I mean, there can be just an incredible singer that he or she has just this, so unique of a sound, and that, boy, then producers will come in and work around, will make that work for them. But that's such a rare talent, or maybe it's a guitar player, but that's the 99.5 rest of us, it's not going to work like that. And and I know that I was guilty of that. I had a great high school education, and I was very accomplished in the small little college I went to, but I suddenly I would get around the next level of people, and it's like, oh my gosh, I've got to work. and what better? I mean, the thing in college is you're learning tools. One of the best tools I learned, when I got to North Texas, I was a jazz study, arranging studies, or I don't know what they call it. But second semester, our first assignment was, okay, on score paper, select a recording of a song you like that has like some orchestration to it, and transcribe every part onto score paper. And we all looked and thought, well, that sounds impossible. How do you hear all that? Well, we did that, and well, that was the best thing. And so when I got out of college, I wasn't working constantly, so I thought, well, I'll just start transcribing things I heard on the TV or a recording. I wanted to learn how to write this kind of trio writing, so I just started transcribing and learning that way. And then, years later, I got to Los Angeles, and there were like these guys in town that were just transcribers, and like to the stars. They worked all the time. But like, I hired this one guy because he would transcribe for Bruce Springsteen, and he just loved to name drop. But the thing is, Bruce would not let you leave with a cassette at the time. Okay, so you had to go to his home, and they would, you had to sit there and do it. And then they would have these hot rodded equalizers, so they could just bring up a certain, if they're trying to get a bass part or what, get those frequencies where that part is, so you could hear it and transcribe it. And they were like so accurate, and that's what they did full time. And so it's like, oh gosh, I guess it's important to get your ear training really going. And it was just very normal. That was just, they were just, and they would do it, they'd be a copyist sometimes and orchestrate, or, but it's like, that was a job that people needed. And, like there were things like, there was a variable speed cassette deck you could get, and even half speed. I think you could do a half speed cassette. That was another thing. You could drop it. And so there were little tricks they had. And it was, the technology is so much more advanced now but even at that time, there were techniques that they could hear it.
Yeah. But of course, if you doesn't it alter the pitch if you slow it down too much or slow it down in the wrong way or whatever? It doesn't now. Our technology now doesn't do that, but.
Right. But that's why you had the variable speed, because sometimes things, might have been mastered a little bit faster, or, or like every how the cassette was printed, printed. It might have just printed a little fast, and so you could tune it exactly to your keyboard or whatever your method of transcribing was. So you could match it exactly. But you really get to, your ear gets very discerning of listening to a specific part. And that's part of my thing in the studio while I'm mixing is I really open up my ears so I can hear everything. Or is there somebody's not together or whatever. I'm trying to find potential mistakes or balance problems, issues or things not being heard that I wrote. So you definitely use it.
That's something I think we could do more of in aural skills is error detection like that. I think this has come up before, but the aural skills books that we use at my school are fantastic and I love them. But the error detection is designed to help the students find their own transcription errors. So essentially they hear the right thing and they're looking at the wrong thing and they need to find the spots that are wrong and fix them. But what you're describing is the other way around, right? You're hearing the wrong thing, you're looking at the right thing, and you've got to find those spots that are wrong and fix them. And that's certainly what our recording majors, music education majors, they need more of that kind of thing. It's just hard to find, it's hard to do that as one human at a piano, but that's a thing that we need to develop more resources for, I think, is that kind of error detection.
Yeah. And like tuning detection, I'll tell you what, and I think it's underused, is auto-tune, is our Melodyne. So these are tuning apps or tuning programs but what it will show you is like, I'll say, oh, I think it's the soprano on that note right there. And then you can actually see the wave and you can see where it dipped and you can narrow it and so it's like verification of like, oh yeah, that was where the mistake was. Well, oh no, actually it was the note leading into it, so you can learn by actually using auto-tune or Melodyne. And now Melodyne can tune like multiple, you can put multiple notes and chords in. So again, it's a good ear training, and I think it could be used more in the classroom. They just don't market it that way. But when you can, what's out of tune, and then you can actually see it on the screen, oh, that one note, that's dipping there, then it's like, it verifies to your ear. It's like, okay, that was a mistake, or so it works as training.
Yeah, I had an interesting experience this past week, actually. I've been trying to do more instruments in our melodic dictation exercises in class. So it's really easy, to just sit at the piano and do every one on there. So I've been having students come in who play things, and I had two flutists who brought their flutes on the same day. So I was like, all right, well, how about you two play this melodic dictation together and we'll, dictate this melody. And tuning was one of the big issues and one of the challenges for the students because, trying to, both flutes were good, but they still didn't play everything always in tune. And of course, they had to play that melody 5 or 6 times. And so each time there's little shades of, flat or sharp, the articulations are different. And so what you're talking about is also like being able to hear tuning and timbre distinctions. And that timbral aspect, or hearing a certain timbre within a musical texture, is something that we hardly ever talk about in an aural skills or a theory setting, but is totally applicable to what you're doing.
Yeah, and particularly professionally, because people, you want perfection. That's the whole thing with the recordings and commercial recordings now. It's just, they're so clamped down with the auto-tune and, or they'll put the vocal in and they'll actually cut each eighth note to a line. They'll put a grid in Pro Tools and just align the vocal. It's just amazing.
What do you think about that, Mark? Do you like that? You listen to an old Beatles album or some of these old Motown tracks and you're just like, boy, that alto is just flat, or that, that guy's out of time. But there's this liveness, right, to that recording. Do you think that's kind of lost today?
Oh, very much so. And the wild thing, or the crazy thing is, like, you'll hear in, like, particularly young kids, if they've listened, they affect their voice to sound as if it's been on auto-tuned. It's like, they'll make a sound like that. And so it's an edited thing, but every so often it turns back around. I mean, certainly, Adele is not perfect, and her timing is not perfect, and yet look how successful that record was. Or Erykah Badu, it's like the people, they are attracted to that, and it just kind of comes in and out of vogue. Or certainly we went through that in the 80s when MIDI just started hitting, and everything was electronic. There were no live instruments, and you listen to the tracks and it's just like, ugh, where now things like Debris and acoustic, and so it just kind of comes in and out of fashion. So, but it's gotten really odd right now, because it's all about sound design and constructing. Like, you can be a very successful songwriter by just coming up with grooves. You don't write a melody, you don't write the lyric. But you can be a staff professional songwriter because you just sequence grooves. And people will hear that, and then the other clique of the writers, let's say, because you see, like, on pop songs, you see 6 names. Well, why? Well, because one guy just came up with the groove, and then one gal, maybe they just sit around and, what about this melody on it? And then somebody else maybe wrote the lyric, and then somebody had a better idea on the bridge for a different melody. And it's fascinating, but people respond to great musicianship still, and there are definitely artists that are there and doing that, and quite popular, and so people respond to it.
One thing I was going to ask you, and this is a confessions, questions of a kind of curious music theory teacher here, which is one thing I've been thinking about as far as curricular development and at least a unit module, let's say. To me, it seems like what you're saying is, within one unit, we could hone certain skills and develop certain skills. Now, whether that's ear training or whether that's more a notational skill, creative compositional skill, or whatnot, can be different depending on the class. But then when you get to the assessment, it seems like to me, and this is one thing I've been trying to move towards in my teaching, some sort of project-based assessment seems to, like, bring those skills together in a really healthy and productive way that seems to be more applicable to someone in the music business, especially. So from your perspective, what do you think about that kind of movement in terms of a unit that hones these skills, and then a end of unit assessment that's a project-based outcome that we can kind of ask our students to produce or give back to us?
Well, I like that, because really, I always find the musicians or the singers will find your mistakes. Okay, if you've notated it, let's say you could have put it in cut time, or you could have, maybe, depending on what meter, you wanted to, but you chose the more complicated way, and suddenly they're making more mistakes. It's a problem.
Right.
You put too many articulations. They couldn't keep it straight. You didn't have any. It's like, why aren't they playing with any emotion? So the assessment happens when you start recording it or having them play how they perform, because I hear a lot of one of my best training grounds is YouTube, of my choral arrangements being sung by a group that I had nothing to do with, because what I hear is they're singing back what I wrote on the page, good, bad, or indifferent, or and I feel like if a choir's out of tune, as an arranger, that's my fault. It's not the teacher's fault. It's not the student's. It's my fault, because I made it either too difficult or the key was wrong, where it sits in their voices. So I need to make a correction in my writing the next time. And so you learn a lot when you had nothing to do with your arranging and somebody reads it, or performs it. It's like, oh, hopefully I've been doing it enough that happens less often, but it's still a good evaluation, or just what makes people or musicians suddenly play out more, or pop, or what is it about? We were listening to Haydn today. Is it the Lord Nelson Mass, or and it was in my choral lit class, and what Haydn had done, he had written the vocal ranges, like he didn't have to write any accents or because he had vocally written all these high notes just to pop in and out where he wanted them to be heard. So his melodic choices really handled that, and it was also enabling it, because there was some discussion, well, isn't that a little too high for singers at times? So I thought, well, no, there were no microphones. He was trying to get the singers to be heard over the orchestra, and so he wrote that technique. It was in his vocal writing. So, the musicians, they find your mistakes for you, or they show you where you need to improve.
I love that.
One of the things that we could talk about is the other non-musical skills, right? You talked about working with performers and things like that in communication. Soft skills are a big buzzword today, but what other kind of skills do music business majors need, and do we need to be teaching more of those types of skills, like entrepreneurship, collaboration, even like marketing ourselves? Like, is there a way that we need to be weaving that into our core music curriculum as well, for not just music business minded folks, but just all music majors?
Well, yes, and I'll touch on a couple different points. One, like, it's like, well, if somebody comes up to me and says, well, how do you, if I want to be a choral writer, I want to do just what you've done, how would you do that? Well, the thing is, I don't know that publishing companies are hiring like a staff writer like myself anymore. Mm-hmm. And so really how somebody would get into it is that they would have their own website, and usually let's say they have either a teaching gig where they have access to a choir, or it could be church, that they can work with singers. They could get simple recordings of things they've arranged. And then they can, you can typeset it yourself in Finale, or, so they can sell downloads. Or they're even, I think with J.W. Pepper, the music dealer, they can market it through there, mm-hmm. and they'll advertise it and sell it that way. So that's like the new model. But how do you build a site? How do you make something downloadable? How do you make good demos that you can listen to? Those kinds of skills. And I would say the other thing is networking skills, because it is like I've always practiced I would always help anybody I could, and particularly in college, because you never know. And that's a hard thing for some kids to realize. And, but I've had example after example of somebody, well, like for instance, when I was at North Texas, Paris Rutherford came to me and said, oh, I have this, like a master's guy, and he needs some work. And so I hired him to help me fill in one of my first musicals. A review I wrote for Hal Leonard, because it was pencil and it was 30 minutes long. So he would, help me build that, and he helped me conduct some vocals. And, so I was able to, have him work. He was, nice guy. And then he graduated on, and, I think he went on and worked, maybe with Yamaha, and, but then suddenly, 25 years later, He's now the president of Hal Leonard Print Publishing, Larry Morton, and who I hired, way back when. Well, when I came to my contract negotiation, he told this whole story to everybody there, and so it comes back, and you want to be known. I see that in Los Angeles all the time. Everybody is great to get along with, because the thing is, you don't want to ever be a problem in a session and bring it down. You want to be a good hang. You want to be pleasant to work with, and also when I'm trying to work with musicians, I am, maybe they're a jerk at times, but I don't, I am super nice, because ultimately I want to get the best performance out of them, because I just have to get it on once on the tape, and then they go, but I will be the friendly, whatever I need to do to make them feel comfortable, whatever, because I'm just trying to get this killer performance out of them. And so those are important skills. And I don't see that necessarily in college today, of people really, hey, will you play on this? Or, I'm busy, it's like that. But that's a very important skill that will affect them in the future, because it's amazing how many people you'll meet again. And if you were a jerk to them or not helpful, it's like, well, I don't know, they don't. So yeah, I would say it's really, for kids now, it's being your own entrepreneur. You've got to learn how to market yourself and get yourself out there, and get attention on yourselves on your own. There's not gonna be a company or somebody else doing it for you.
And it seemed like that's something that you developed in college, or even like before. That's like something that you were able to work on, and obviously it really paid off. I mean, even just thinking about our little group here, like Jenn and I went to undergrad together back way back then. We had no idea that we would be making a podcast together like 20 years later. And we weren't even really friends back then. But
no, like acquaintances, basically.
We're acquaintances at this. But you're like, oh, Jen's nice. I think she plays the French horn, right? Okay, cool. But that was basically it, right? But you never know what's going to happen and who you might run into, and what's going to happen. Yeah.
And and sometimes it could be not there's somebody who wasn't that accomplished in college can like turn around and become this incredible songwriter, so it's like you can't, you just don't know, and it's just a good thing in life. It's just if you're friendly and easy to work with, and fun, I mean, all those things really, they will pay dividends for you as you go along. So I could tell other stories, but
well, so you're working.
You.
Yeah, you're working right now on Reading Rainbow Live, right?
Yes.
Probably a fair amount of our listeners, myself included, like I loved Reading Rainbow. So tell us about how you got into that project and what kind of work are you doing there?
Well, we've had our first episode. It was filmed in New York City, and I was brought in because they were putting together the production team, and a lady I knew in New York who she had helped me producing or executive producing some other projects I've been working on. She was called in to produce this. They needed somebody to do the music, and so she recommended me. And then as I was interviewing with the producers, the fact that I had actually done things with Frog Street Press and a lot of kids oriented music, I produced a Looney Tunes CD, and that I seemed to be a good fit, and also with my education background. So that's how I was brought in. So again, it was not from a demo. It was from a recommendation and an interview. Okay. And then I have on my website, markbrymer.com, you can listen to some examples of my writing, simple resumes. So though, again, that's how people check you out. They may look at you on Facebook. I'll type people in all the time on Facebook or Instagram, see what you can tell about them. YouTube, is a great way. And so then I was brought into the project, and it's been a little crazy in terms of they had the date of their first episode, but we were still putting together the production team. The director was brought in at the last moment. I was told to start writing things. I started writing things, and then the new director is like, "Oh no, I don't want that." It's like, well, wait, that was assigned to me. So, I mean, you're writing, you're rewriting. It was a low budget, so I had to come in very affordably on the budget, and so that meant I would be recording with singers who could read in Dallas. But then I got into the studio in New York to record the on-air talent, and they said, "Oh no, they will be singing everything. We don't want that." And where did that come from? I go, "Well, that's what you could afford, but that didn't matter because the director didn't want that." So, okay, I just had to adjust my thinking immediately and say, "Okay, well, we'll make that work," and so but it came out great, and people were very happy with it. We went through a couple of different sounds, and it ended up like the acoustic bass is a key element to the accompaniment sound. It's like and some is MIDI, but it's all acoustic sounding instruments. There are no real electronics in the backgrounds. And so it's been an exciting process. So what's happening now with them is the executive producer is now raising the money. They want to now develop for a whole season. And so we'll probably be down about a month or so before we can pick back up. The other neat thing, I was able to introduce them to the folks at McGraw-Hill. And so they're talking through a sponsorship, and that was positive that I knew both sets of parties and I could introduce them. And so again, it's relationships, and you work with this person. What about this? You're always on, no matter who you're talking to, and you've got to stay aware of that, because that you'll keep working that way.
Yeah. Now we kind of skipped over this question, but I do want to ask this question because I think it might be interesting. Just because we know that Dr. Weaver has been your theory teacher, has there been something in theory that you have not found as useful as other things? Is there something you're like, well, these other things are great. I love learning about the Neapolitan chord.
I could guess something.
I figured bass.
That's what I was just going to say. He's going to say figured bass.
It's the biggest waste of time. I mean, I'm sorry. But, because the thing is, okay, it's another way of doing chord symbols, but like you're going to ever use it. I'd rather either learn chord symbols or learn the number system out of Nashville. I don't even understand that, but that would be real helpful. But I know it's just trying to get your brain to do, but who cares now? And that's, boy.
I love that. We're keeping that in here. For sure.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
Well, I was going to guess it. I was like, he's going to say figured bass. Really, we've had that conversation.
Yeah, I'm not. It's, and of course,
well, I think, aren't you having to realize it now in keyboard skills?
We haven't. No, we haven't gotten to that yet. I guess she hadn't mentioned that. Now, great. Now you'll mention it to her. Okay.
I had already mentioned it.
Oh, okay, great.
But
no. That's no. I've been getting an A in keyboard skills. Well, you can kind of figure it out. I mean, it's like if you get how it think. I think that's where you threw me on. I got on the board. It's like, I never done this, but I'll give it a try, and so you can kind of figure it out, but it's just like, oh gosh.
To my credit, really? We don't do very much of it.
I know. No, you don't.
At DBU. So we don't even start it until Theory 3 at DBU. And even after that, we do very little of it. I think in Theory 4, we did it like maybe twice because it was going to be on the big cumulative, like whole theory proficiency exam thing. It was on there. So we did it like once or twice.
Yeah. And if things are on tests or in like if going on to get your master, I mean, there are things you have to play the game, and they want to test you on that. So you got to learn it. So I get it. But
you're a good sport.
Yeah, I can be grumpy about it. Yeah.
You weren't grumpy about it. You just did it. It was fine.
Yeah.
Well, this has been such a treat, Mark, to chat with you and get your insight and all your kind of fun stories, and that's your really great wisdom about not just folks who want to be in the music business career, but just who want to have a career in music, where they are working with other people. The idea of the composer as this, hermit who's just by themselves, writing and no interaction with others. And, it's just not real. That just doesn't happen, right? It doesn't happen anymore. Always this collaboration. And even if you're writing, in your room, it doesn't happen. Like the music doesn't happen until you get it in front of other people and other people hear it, and so you have to be able to work with folks and take feedback. And I love hearing about how you had to take even some negative feedback from other kind of the producer and be like, no, we want to go in here, and how you're able to just pivot into something new, and not take it personally, and not get hung up with that, because that's another really important skill to have. Yeah,
and it's hard, but you can do it. You can do it. Well, thank you all for inviting me. I sure appreciate this.
Do we want to do some rapid fire? We kind of said that in the email.
Oh, man. Yeah.
I have one, actually.
Okay, go for it.
It's nothing related to music theory, but I wanted to ask you this, Mark, because before I knew you were coming on, I was on YouTube, and I'll just ask you the question, then I'll circle back to YouTube. What does it feel like to be the person responsible for countless performances of "We Don't Talk About Bruno" in high school choirs this spring? Let me just explain. So I was on YouTube, and right up the front page, suggested videos, which tells you everything you need to know about what I watch on YouTube, is the Hal Leonard, or the YouTube video of, and I was like, I should check this out, and I listened to it, and I was like, it's Mark Brymer, and then I texted Jenn, I'm like, Mark arranged this. So tell us a little bit about, talk to the choir directors who are all going, oh no, I can't get out of this. I have to program this song because the arrangement exists for that song.
I want them to. I want them to.
It's a great arrangement. It's really cool.
It came out great, and it's really fun. It's really fun, and there are a lot of factors that went into it. I mean, some of the challenges is that Lin-Manuel wrote really almost like 7 or 8 melodies, and it's the same chord progression. But and then they counterpoint, so it's the world's largest partner song that you don't realize he's building a partner song, but that's what he does. But at the end, you've got you think through, I've got 2, how many lines do I have, and consolidate them. And, because there are other factors when you're arranging for pop. A teacher doesn't want to spend, we're talking about assessment, but they don't want to spend like hour after hour on this type of song. So, it matters how long you make it. You try to simplify it enough that you're thinking about, in a certain amount of classes, they can get this taught. Now it's kind of a unique thing because like kids walk in knowing it, so it's, it doesn't matter, but, there are a lot of factors like that, but no, I'm thrilled, because you never know. I mean, there are all these great stories about, you don't know. I mean, like all the songs had been passed out to the other 2 or 3 staff writers, and Bruno was not one of them. That was not picked as the hit because Helena got advanced copies. And so when it hit the charts, then I called in and asked for Bruno. So, and Mac Huff got stuck with, I don't know, Columbia. It was like a boring song, but he was guessing. You guess. I mean, like there's the classic story from the Titanic, My Heart Will Go On. It got passed off to a guy who doesn't do a lot of steady arranging because everybody at Helen Leonard listened to it go, I don't think I'll do anything. And it was like, it's sold. So you're always looking for that instant big hit. So I'm getting to enjoy that my moment in the sun with Bruno, and I added a fourth voicing, a 3-part mixed, and I'm getting badgered on Facebook. Why isn't there a 2-part? And my publisher won't let me. So it's on, but it's all good. It's all good. It gets, I got the coolest response from one teacher is that they said, well, after COVID, they haven't seen their classroom this excited about singing since COVID hit. And that would have meant so much to me because it's like, oh, if this develops enthusiasm for singing and being in choir, then I've done my job. That's what it's really all about. And that type of song is just always in your folder next to the Mozart, next to the other pieces that will do a well-rounded program. But you need that little bit of, candy in there to get them sometimes there and give them that moment to sing that and enjoy it.
Yeah.
So
I think the same year in high school that we did Brahms' How Lovely Is Thy Dwelling Place from the German Requiem, we also did like an arrangement of a bunch of songs from Les Mis. And I got to tell you, back then I would have been hard pressed to say which one of those was my favorite. It might have been Les Mis. Like definitely that got me going to choir class, every day.
Yeah. It's a strategy, but and it works, so that's and it's interesting is if I try to write too much out of that niche, J.W. Pepper is not happy about it, and they don't they don't want, they want to, this is what sells, and your name sells here, and so it's like, okay. I could think of worse problems, so it's like, yeah.
Your music could not sell anywhere. I mean, there's a lot of folks where...
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Ooh. Any other rapid fire?
Ben, do you want to go or do you want me to go?
Oh, I'll go. I have a very targeted kind of question here, very practical as well, hopefully. But I'm going to say a scenario, and I want you to respond. That you have 3 arrangers that you've been told they're going to be your new staffers, but you only have one lesson to teach them. You only have 1 hour to teach them. So what do you teach them in that hour?
I actually would teach them, we would discuss templates and finale about what the assignment was and how the parts need to look and what I'm expecting to be on the parts and the chart itself. If there's issues with tempo, I would make sure they understand how to, with the tempo marking, that they can develop the timing of it, because it will matter. If we're, let's say, recording all 3 of their charts on one session, it needs to align. I don't want one crazy looking chart because then it throws everybody. So I would be assuming that they have chops in arranging. I'm not, spell a major 7. It's not that, but
right.
it will matter how the parts look and the organization of the score.
Yeah. No, that's great. That gives us more information as to what we really are needing to get at.
Notation is, and I would say the other thing I'm seeing is just a shyness in teaching finale, and notation software. Is that, come on, you've got to know that, and and so it's really, it kind of gets beyond you guys. The school needs to be providing this, and I just don't want to hear, well, Sibelius gave us a good deal, or Note Flag, gave us a good deal, and so that's what we're providing to the students. And that shouldn't happen. I mean, they need finale is the industry standard. Yes, they can. Sibelius is there too. I mean, you can learn both, but to not know finale when you get out and be able to notate and score things, that's not good.
Yeah, no, that was a big learning curve for a lot of my students when I gave them the project last semester. And a lot of them had really nice handwritten versions, but it took them a while to get it into finale just because they didn't have the experience. And that can create a barrier to success if you don't have that competency. So it's important. I think you bring up a really good point. I love your answer.
Well, I've hired assistants at different times, and if somebody comes to interview for me, I'll go, okay, go in the other, I'll set up a chart, I'll go, okay, enter in this melody, this song, this like lead sheet, and I'll give you 5 minutes. Go. And they'll have to do that right there, or I can kind of see them work. And you see, it's like and then if they can't do it, it's like, oh, okay, well, that's going to waste my time. I'm not going to, teach it. So,
right.
Yeah.
Oh, that
sounds
very good.
Sounds cruel.
No,
that makes really good sense.
No.
Yeah.
How do you communicate clearly? You have to be able to notate it, right?
Yeah. And a lot of what I do gets down to minutes. Like, how many minutes of music can I produce with the singers? How many minutes of music can I write in a day? How many, I'm set up for, because a lot of times I'll have to write a lot of things quickly. And I have all my set templates. I have my assistant fill in the lead sheet. If I'm doing a medley, we'll go into Pro Tools and we'll cut exactly the portions of the song I want to arrange. I make sure the timing will fit, and then I'll have somebody else transcribe it into the score. Then I take it, I fill in the piano part, the SATB. I might do the voicings, but I might hand it back over to my assistant to fill that in, and then I have to check it. But I'm working on to the next chart, and you can get through a lot of things quickly, and you got to get them, sent in. So there are ways to do big projects, and certainly, film scoring is like that. They're constantly, it's a film, coming out for Thanksgiving, and they're recording the score in September, the first part of October, and it's, a lot of music cues. It's done really fast, and you've just got to have the people that can deliver and deliver quickly.
Yeah, very true. All right, so this is my rapid fire question, and I'm asking you this because I know this is something you do really well. So what is something you'll understand in a minute. What is something that you have learned? It doesn't have to be like at DBU, it could be from prior education experiences or something like that, but something that you've learned in the classroom and you've just immediately transferred it to work that you've been doing.
Well, I mean, when we took Music Theory 4, there were a lot of systems, contemporary music systems, the digits, the numbers. I found that really fascinating in terms of, so I think you wanted us to write something, but I took a set of 6 pitches and wrote an entire piece just using those 6 pitches. But I wanted it, it was not clusters of things, I wanted it to sound like real music. And so you really couldn't necessarily notice it as it went by, but I was writing, it's a new, larger work I'm working on, so I was able to immediately use that component. And I'm trying to think what else that was really, really, really fun. And then the other thing that I've really been exposed to is different composers. Like I didn't really know about the minimalist type of music that got exposed to me. Well, I bought scores and look, it's harmonium. I bought the
John
score.
Adams, yeah.
Yeah, John Adams. Yeah, so it's so I'm using my transcribing skills. What is that there? And I listen to it, and then I'm utilizing that in another section of this this larger work. Is So I'm finding it all across the board. That's what's kind of fun going back to college at my age, is that I'm able to utilize everything so quickly. That it just makes it very real, and it's important for kids to realize it's like, this is not stuff you learn and to be forgotten. You are going to use this, and you can. I mean, it's just, you can, like right now. You can do this in your assignments and, use it, try it out. I mean, this is a safe environment to try things out, but use these things.
Absolutely.
No, that's great. I wish we all had Mark Brymers in our classroom, Jen.
It is pretty fun.
Yeah.
It's a blessing, it's a curse.
No, it's great. It's great.
All right. Well, as we wrap up, maybe just let our listeners know, I think you mentioned your website, but you can mention again maybe how folks could reach out to you to learn more about what you're up to find your music, and any other projects you're working on. You mentioned the Reading Rainbow Live, but anything else you've got cooking?
Well, reaching me, I have a lot of different websites, but markbrymer.com, and I'm Mark at markbrymer.com is the easiest way to, find my email and reach me that way. I'm on Facebook. I try to be as open to answering questions or interacting with people. I mean, because it's fun, and it's a good approach. It's fun to connect with teachers a lot, because the first thing they might do, I'll say, hey, say hello to your kids for me. And, it makes a connection. And then the kids think, oh, you know him? It's like, yeah, but it's just like I work for teachers, and I work for choral directors, and to get that. As for working, I'm trying to now develop a larger work, about an 80 to 90 minute work called The Kings of Oil, that I've hired a librettist, but I'm thinking something that's it's a mixed media kind of choral opera. So it will have a choir, it will have actors, it will have a multimedia component, and so a choir, and then a chamber orchestra. And it's going to tell the story of, really from the 1920s, of some of the major oilmen in Texas and Oklahoma through music. So it could be performed by a professional choir, or more like a contemporary opera company is what we're aiming for. And I have hired an executive producer who's helping me get grants, and I'm. Like, for instance, okay, so Reading Rainbow, I had to hire a studio in New York. So I found this one that was close to it, because Doug Besterman, who I follow on Instagram, who's the orchestrator for Thoroughly a Modern Millie, and he's just excellent. He has a little office there, so I called them up, and I could get in, and it was like near the theater district. Well, it ends up, the gentleman who owns it had engineered all the Steve Reich recordings, like music for 18 musicians, and he was their audio engineer and had done some things for John Adams. And so it's like, well, how cool! I'm trying to learn about this, and so I kind of made that connection and talked to him about that a little bit. And I'm hoping with this other work, it's like, hey, can you help me? Maybe finding a semi-professional group in New York City to perform it. So, I'm going after some big things, and we'll see. We'll see.
So that's our show. Thank you so much for listening to Note Doctors, the Music Theory and Pedagogy podcast. We will be back with more interviews with professors and teachers who will be dropping all sorts of theory knowledge for your education, edification, and enjoyment. So until then, bye-bye.